Hey, 2.7 is finally on the horizon, and it looks like we're heading straight back to the chasm with the rather eclectic bunch of misfits in tow. Now, I could take you guys beat for beat through the trailer, pointing out the tiny details that you may have missed, but we don't really have a whole lot of time left in 2.6, and there's really only two main topics I want to cover, so I'm gonna do it really fast, and I apologize if it gets a little bit messy in the process. So first, before we get to those little things I want to cover, let's jump into the premise of this update. Like, how all of this gets started, how Ito and Kuki Shinobu end up in Liyue, because that's not exactly immediately obvious unless you're someone like me who goes through all of the voice lines of the characters every time there's an update to see if there's anything new. Yep. Anyway, according to the live stream, Kuki Shinobu is finally getting the chance to graduate from law school, which is something that was put on hold thanks to the Sakoku decree. Well, most likely. I mean, if your homeland closes while you're there, it's kind of hard to show up for your, graduation ceremony in another country, I think, so. Anyway, Ito is probably accompanying her as her one and chaperone, and Yanfei is someone she knows from law school, so that's those three. Now, Yelan and Xiao are a little bit different because they are conducting their own independent investigations in the chasm. Yelan seems keen to get the Traveler involved with her investigation, and also she's interested in the Traveler, but not like that. And Xiao seems a little bit reluctant to get the Traveler involved, or at least that seems to be his thing because he likes to operate alone, so that's a safe assumption, I think. But how these five characters end up working together is anyone's guess. I'm not really sure how a graduation ceremony can end up in the chasm, but hey, Ito's a nosy little bugger. Maybe he tags along and drags the girls with him. I don't know, but that's the basic idea here. Now, we don't know a whole lot about her, so I'm not entirely sure what Yelan really wants to investigate in the chasm specifically. It seems like she has an interest in either what happened 500 years ago, or what happened when she was a child, or both. Xiao, on the other hand, is a little bit more predictable because the chasm is a place where a really great battle took place, and that's where at least one of his comrades died. So if anything is disturbing that area, it makes sense that he would want to investigate it. But that kind of leads me into the very first thing that I want to talk about. So if you look at the trailer, we first spot Xiao back in the room with the celestial nail. But the floor actually looks a little bit different, like it's opened up a little bit. Whatever the Traveler did here triggered something that's made the area a little bit unstable, which is most likely what prompted him to investigate in the first place. Now, here's the thing. Roughly 2,500 years ago, by my estimates, Morax made a deal with the 5 of the strongest Yaksha. Their responsibility was to subdue the resentment of the fallen gods from the Archon War because said resentment was causing plagues, monsters, infestations, and disasters. Over time, this resentment built up inside each of the Yakshas, and it killed 3 of them. One of them just vanished, and then that left Xiao, who barely made it by the skin of his teeth. We'll talk about the specifics of this a little bit later, but this is enough for you to know for now. So 500 years ago, so like 2,000 years later, the cataclysm in Conria happened and somehow triggered miasma and monsters to pour out of the chasm. Morax ordered the Yaksha to fight alongside the Millelith to protect the people of Liyue. One Yaksha, the electro one, notably fought to the death in the depths of the chasm. It's also most likely his voice that we hear in the trailer saying, "Die with me," which might seem a little bit weird because if he's supposed to be dead, then how is he talking to us? Well, if you recall, in Xiao's story quest, he talks about an Adepti art that he uses called the Dream Trawler. He says it's an art used to, quote, separate the soul from the body so that they can experience a waking dream. So I'm thinking that we're actually going to be witnessing each character's dreams, but maybe in the form of nightmares. Which is appropriate because, Xiao's former master used to kind of like lock him up and force him to commit atrocities and eat people's dreams, and so like his master's evil and associated with dreams, and that just kind of means that we're gonna be in for some painful Xiao backstory time. Like, imagine Xiao having to relive the cataclysm all over again, or relive his era of servitude. And for the other characters, like, let's think about Shinobu reliving something that scares her about her mother, maybe, because I'm pretty sure the character they put right here is her mother. And for Yelan, maybe she relives some suppressed memories or something that she's searching for that are really tragic. And of course, the Traveler. It's actually the Traveler's greatest fear, and we've seen them have this same dream a couple times before, which is again why I think this is more of a dreamscape thing. I'm also confident about Xiao having to go back in time to the Cataclysm, even if it's only through like a dream or like a weird temporal distortion, mostly because of this fantastic compass thing. Now, if you look at the fantastic compass, there's actually 3 shots that they show us. The first one has a gem on this mountain over here in the corner, but it has no real fixtures, like no scaffolding or anything. And then the second one is like a bright red sky with a little bit of scaffolding, and then if you notice, there's no gem in the upper left-hand corner anymore. And then in the third one, we've got scaffolding, the gem in the corner again, and the sky is back to normal. So there's like 3 different states here that we can identify immediately, but the red one is the important one. That red sky is very similar to the same shot from the We Will Be Reunited trailer where the moon itself turned red. That's what helps us place the scene here at around the time of the Cataclysm. So what I would like to propose is that we're going to meet the Electro Yaksha's spirit as he relives the day of his death, and no, I really don't think he's alive. Even if Xiao's audio clip here is a little bit suggestive of that. See, I think it's really important that Xiao's audio glitches at this exact point. Like I said before, I think it's all a nightmare where things feel more real than they actually are. And just to prove how confident I am that the Electro Yaksha is dead, this is, the second thing I want to talk about. First off, and here's a really quick preview for a theory video I'm working on, artifact sets only describe dead people, with one singular exception that doesn't apply here in this exact case, but more on that in the actual theory video. Now, the Electro Yaksha has the Vermillion Hereafter set, and since he doesn't fall under that singular exception, he's probably kicked the bucket just based on that theory alone. However, I obviously can't use it as my only proof point, but hey, lucky me, this theory is supported by both the text in the Vermillion Hereafter set and the Calamity Queller, which we know belonged to him, outright states that he's dead. Well, it says he was, quote, lost, returned to silence, but that sounds like death to me. So yeah, Electro Yaksha is most likely dead, and that's why I think Xiao's audio glitch here matters. But the real question here, and the real thing I want to talk about, isn't whether or not he's dead though, it's when did he die, because that changes who he is in the lineup of names that we have for the Yaksha. And we do have names for them, we just don't know who is who. For sure. Anyway. Now I'm phrasing it this way because of a world quest called The Yaksha's Wish, where we get to read a message left behind by a Yaksha named Bosacius, and we get to take his treasure. Now, Bosacius is most definitely the Yaksha that, quote, vanished without a trace. A few things we can note about him are that he upheld his contract with Morax and that he left his treasure only after Liyue was at peace, and that he wished to be, quote, done with this world, which I've taken to mean search for a final resting place. So I think Bosacius is also dead, but that he survived longer than the other 3 because we don't count Xiao. He's fine. Kind of. Now let me be clear that both the Electro and Geo Yaksha are viable candidates for the name Bosacius, but I am personally a little biased towards the Geo Yaksha. This is because of the Tenacity of the Millelith set. This set describes the Cataclysm at the Chasm specifically, and the Millelith who fought against the Abyss alongside an entity that they called the Nameless Yaksha, who supposedly did not have a contract with Morax. This is important because this set also implies that multiple Yaksha were present at the Cataclysm, and it clearly states that Rex Lapis ordered the Yaksha to fight at this time. But for Morax to do that, the Yakshas couldn't have been corrupted yet. They could not have died, right? That made me realize that we can actually make a rough timeline of the Yaksha's service. And this is a little bit of a theory, obviously. Just mini disclaimer there. So, the Archon War ended roughly 2,600 years ago, right? Morax crushed his enemies and their resentment filled the land, manifesting as plague, monsters, and disasters. Well, yeah, we went over that already. But after a time, this became absolutely unbearable for the people, so Rex Lapis summoned the 5 foremost Yaksha to take care of it. They kept this up for eons, and since that's plural and an eon is about 1,000 years, that would be about 2,000 years. Now, I think that at some point during this 2,000 years of service, the Electro Yaksha specifically decided to forego his contract. The reason being is that in the Vermillion Hereafter set, he's described as a wanderer from afar. If he was dutifully protecting Liyue, I just really doubt he'd be described like this. It's super weird, right? So that would mean that all 5 Yaksha, about 500 years ago, were alive, even if one was off doing his own thing, right? But then the cataclysm in Conria causes the chasm to erupt with miasma and monsters. At this point, Rex Lapis orders the Yaksha that are remaining, so 4 of them, to assist the Millelith in defending Liyue. They do so, and supposedly around this time, the Electro Yaksha should have returned to fight alongside his former comrades in an attempt to make up for neglecting his duty. This makes him the Nameless Yaksha. Now, in the chasm, the abyssal corruption is way too powerful for these, Yaksha that have put in over 2,000 years of service and have absorbed so much karmic debt. It's so much, right? So it's reasonable to assume that such an influx of abyssal energy would cause some problems for them. We know that the Pyro Yaksha went mad with fear, and the Geo Yaksha fought and killed the Hydro Yaksha. And then the Electro Yaksha eventually succumbed to darkness or corruption, and we also know that he died alongside the fallen Millelith in the depths of the chasm. Xiao survived, making his way all the way to Dihua, where Venti's flute allowed him to regain some control of his senses, which means that the Geo Yaksha's fate is actually unknown, or rather unconfirmed. So I would like to propose that after the abyss was suppressed and Liyue was once again at peace, the Geo Yaksha managed to regain some of his senses, but felt immense regret, so he vanished, leaving behind a note and his belongings for someone to find. That would make the Geo Yaksha Bosacious, and that would make Hydro Indarius, Pyro Menogius, and Electro Bananas. Now, I grant you that this makes a lot of assumptions, but it's the best I can do for right now. We can test this theory thoroughly in a week or 2. But that said, I also want to mention that all of this might not matter much at all, and that the voice Xiao hears in the chasm might actually be that of his former master. The one that enslaved him and forced him to commit countless atrocities and made him devour people's dreams. It's the dream theme, right? It's a long shot, but it's possible. The villain voice sounds comically evil enough to match Xiao's former master, so I'm just throwing it out there. And with those 2 theories that I wanted to talk about out of the way, here are some rapid-fire expectations and observations. This is not a blow-by-nut blow. It's not really one of those 15 things you missed things, but just here's 6 things. 1. The Fantastic Compass is just called a mechanism in Chinese. I think it might actually be a compass, though, in the sense that it deals with location and maybe warping us to them than it does with something like time. But again, it's a mechanism. It might not literally be a compass, just something worth noting. 2, there's a moon on the Fantastic Compass, and I'm suspecting that this device, whatever it is, might date back to the era of the Moon Sisters. It also might have something to do with the Solar Chariot, which was said to have fallen into the chasm and then repaired and sent back up, or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a possibility, so I'm mentioning it. 3, Yelan is almost exactly how I pictured Skirk to look. This means nothing, I just think it's funny. I'll probably end up using a lot of her stuff for a theory on Skirk if we ever get to that point. And 4, I fully expect to get some backstory on the Traveler as they traverse in their own nightmares. Finally! If we don't get Traveler lore, I'm gonna cry! I'm actually gonna cry, man! 5, the Primordial Era doorway here really reminds me of that freaky warping painting in the library in Enkanomiya. Are we really dealing with alternate dimensions, or are we time traveling? I'm not really sure at this point. Anything goes. And finally, number 6, the mud is back, baby! It wasn't actually mentioned in the trailer. It's mentioned as an event later on, so there's a whole event on that, which we will go over when that happens. But if you're confused about this mud thing and why I'm excited about it, I highly recommend you check out my video on the Celestial Nail and the Chasm Mud before the update drops if you have not done so already. Might be putting some of those theories in there to the test this update, so it's, worth looking at, I guess, maybe. Buy you some time for this week we have before 2.6 finally ends. But yeah, I think that just about covers it. No special sign-off for me for today, just a good old-fashioned thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in version 2.7. Let's get hyped!